Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Sports Exchange. My name is Scott Morganroth, the Motor City Manmouth, and we are live here in Pensacola, Florida. And I'm alongside my broadcast partner this weekend, Chris Garagiola. Chris, welcome to the broadcast.
Hey, man, glad to be on here. Thanks for letting me join you.
Oh, well, hey, I've had an opportunity to join you the last couple of days, and, I hadn't done any play-by-play since 1987. And here I am back in 2021 doing it with you. So, Chris, I know it's been an eventful couple of days you pairing up with me, hasn't it?
It's been a lot of fun. Obviously our owner Quint Studer let us know that you were going to be in town, and your lovely wife as well. You guys have been such great guests, and wasn't sure obviously what to expect. You came out of the gates at about 200 miles an hour, but I really got to see your passion and your energy, and yeah, it was just great having you for the last couple of days.
Oh, it's been a lot of fun, and now we're continuing that fun. So let's talk a little bit, Chris, about, you come from a broadcast family, obviously, about your grandfather Joe and your uncle Steve. What's it been like to, through all these years, to be able to grow up and watch these individuals in action?
I'll be honest with you, broadcasting was never my intent when I was a kid. I never really thought about that. I think like a lot of kids, I wanted to be a professional baseball player. By the time I got to high school, I had to make some difficult decisions about what I wanted to do and whether or not I still love the game of baseball. I wasn't having that much fun playing it, but I gave it a shot in college. And when I was there, that's when I really discovered the passion for broadcasting. So I would listen to the stories of Steve and his work in Detroit. And obviously, with my grandfather, every dinner, whether it was a Sunday dinner or Thanksgiving, he had an incredible baseball story that I'm sure that you've heard over the air at some point or another. But he was always, Papa, as I called him. I never thought of him as the broadcaster. I know people to this day still will ask me, hey, are you related? Is it the same Garagiola? And it just tells me that was the impact that he left on them when baseball was certainly so special in this country. And I don't know if I'll ever have that same impact. I don't really try to. I just try to do the best job that I can. And obviously I wish I had more time to ask him questions, because I think he was one of the greatest to have ever done it. And I run into situations all the time where how should I call this, or, what should I be looking for here? And I'll just have to trust moving forward that I'll know what to do.
So what school did you attend, and also what position did you play?
Yeah, in high school in Arizona, when I played baseball a lot more, I was a first baseman and a pitcher. I went through some hitting struggles there, and I think I gave up a little bit too early. It's unfortunate now you work in pro ball and you have the chance to talk to so many great coaches and managers and players as well, and there's so many little things about the game that it's like, if I knew that when I was 15, who knows? But I ultimately took a year off between high school and college. It's one of the best things I've ever done. I'd recommend it to anybody. That's not what you're talking about. When I did finally go to college, I enrolled at Trinity University. It's a Division III in San Antonio. It's a great Division III baseball program. They're always knocking on the door on a College World Series berth. But what was great about Trinity is they had a CNN-style newsroom where my freshman year, I auditioned to be a sports anchor. I did that for a year. I was one of the lead anchors for a couple of years as well. I really struggled doing that, and it was great to struggle there because I still had a lot of fun, and it made me want to pursue further opportunities once I graduated in 2015. You know what? Anytime you start any activity, you're probably not going to be that great at it. Nobody knocks it out of the park the first time. Right. So I watched that tape and I learned from it. And from that, more opportunities to broadcast at Trinity came to be. And, it really, like I said, when I graduated, it really gave me a sense of, I think I can maybe do this. And now it's just about trying to find one of those jobs. And, you know how hard that can be.
Would it surprise you, Chris, that when I played ball way back in the day, I was in Little League for like 5 years and pony ball for a year. But of those 6 years, I was a catcher. Myself, not very good speed, certainly not a great hitter, much better defensively. But I will tell you one thing, folks. I was guilty of more catcher interference calls. I was trying to get any advantage. I would talk to the hitters and distract them, talk to the umpires, do mound visits, and do anything I could to go ahead and talk any way I possibly could to getting ahead of somebody else. Now that shouldn't surprise you, should it?
No, I think that is a perfect explanation, and certainly prepared you for your broadcasting career and the reputation that you've built certainly online. So we just got to dig up some of those old clips if there are any, or
Oh, me playing ball? No.
see what's out there.
Oh, the only thing I got close to that is myself dressed in catcher's attire back home, with me being a scrawny 4 foot something guy wearing a catcher's equipment, taking a beating behind the plate, like I gave you the Timex analogy earlier. You didn't know. Take a ticking and keep on. Take, you know how the Timex goes.
Right.
And keep on. Take a licking and keep on talking. There you go, folks. You got that right. And but
You gotta breathe, buddy.
What's that?
You gotta breathe.
Oh, I breathe all I need to breathe. There'll be a time when I can and when I can't. But I'm going to tell you one thing about that Timex. When I played the game, though, and I think when you talk about over the years when I've gone out there and interviewed people, I've interviewed every position, but it wouldn't be no secret to anybody that do I have a great relationship with catchers? You know, we don't know the tricks anyways. It doesn't make a lick of difference. With that said, okay, let's talk about your passion for baseball per se. I know your dad obviously works with the Arizona Diamondbacks. So did you ever work with the Diamondbacks and at one point and talk about your passion for baseball, knowing that you certainly are part of an organization, your family? I know your grandpa worked for the Diamondbacks for a while. I think he did broadcasting.
Sure, he did.
As well, and your dad. So talk about your passion for baseball and connect with the Arizona Diamondbacks.
Yeah, I'll answer the second part of that question first. My first job when I was in high school was during the summer, and I worked for the Diamondbacks, not in any front office capacity. It was really just a game day volunteer, and it was called a GSR, a guest services representative. And what my job was before the game, 2 hours before gates open, I would stand outside, and we had to wear straw hats, these recycled bottle shirts that you hear sometimes about, bright red,
Right.
and these khaki shorts. And for one of the great things the Diamondbacks they do have is for people who are elderly or struggle walking, have a disability, we have wheelchairs that are stationed at different points in the ballpark, so we can just help people move around the stadium. It's a huge complex Chase Field. It seats almost 46,000 people. So I would stand out there, and then when people would come, I would help wheel them to their seats. And then when they were ready to go, they could ring us, and we would pick them up in the wheelchair, take them to whichever parking lot they'd want to. I did that for 2 summers. And then during the game, I'd walk around the concourse, fans have questions or anything that would pop up. I'd help out in any capacity. The thing you'll learn about me when it comes to baseball and work and things like that is I've never really been one to try and ask Dad to, hey, get me this job, get me that job. I'm sure they could have found something if I were that type of person, maybe working with the broadcast. But I was just like everybody else, and there were a lot of afternoon July days where I was just pouring sweat, just hoping we could get someone to walk up to the gate so I could get a little bit of air conditioning. But I think my mom and dad's perspective, it was important to do the hard work and earn the opportunities that might come your way. So the first part of your question, the passion about baseball, I'm not joking. There was a period in my life for about 3 years where I just did not like the game. I didn't like the players. I didn't like the attitudes, the egos, certainly in the college level. But, as I got out of there and worked for the Cincinnati Reds as an intern and got to know some of those baseball people and really started to understand the beauty and the intricacies of the game, I really started to fall in love with it again. And it was only until I got to the minors, in 2017 and working with Pat Kelly and Danny Darwin and Travis Gookie Dawkins, like those guys really embraced me as someone who, I know the last name, people think that there's a brand recognition that goes with that, but I had a lot to learn. My grandfather was an expert when it came to baseball. He played it, he studied it, he breathed it. And I had spent like 3 years removed for the most part. So those guys were patient with me. They answered my questions. They helped me see the game at the speed in which they see it. And man, at that point, I just try and tell anyone I can, it's such a beautiful sport. And I just wish that things were a little bit better in the way that we talk about baseball. Because I think if more people understood those little intricacies of the game, they'd fall in love with it just as quickly as I did.
Very interesting, because I know that baseball has undergone a lot of rule changes. And for you as a broadcaster now, trying to keep up with the rule changes, especially more so in the minor leagues where there's a lot more experimental that goes
Absolutely.
against the purity of the game as well. So I can certainly appreciate your point. I did live in Arizona, folks, by the way, back in 2001 when the Diamondbacks won it all. And let's not kid ourselves, that was an unbelievable feeling regardless of how old you are.
Yeah.
That was the first major championship ever in that area. Did you feel a part of that yourself a little bit?
I'll tell you what, I was a little kid. I think I was in the 3rd grade when it happened. So it's hard to understand the magnitude of what's happening. I knew as a kid, right, we wanted to win. And I knew who the Yankees were, and obviously it was around 9/11. So I had a kind of understanding of what was happening within the country at that time. But when Soriano hits the home run in the bottom of the 8th inning, I mean, a ball that's like that far off the ground, I look over, I think, to my grandma, and I'm like, why are you so sad? Like, not understanding that we're about to lose the freaking World Series here to the Yankees in a series that Arizona, quite frankly, had dominated in their wins. And the rain had started to come down, but I'll tell you, I remember the 9th inning, the bottom of the 9th inning. I mean, it's clear as if it happened yesterday. And when I watch highlights of it, like on YouTube, and I put the headphones on,
Right.
I mean, it still gives me goosebumps, and it still makes my eyes well up with tears. Because I still to this day have never heard a crowd noise like that when the ball dropped and everyone just went crazy there. And this would never happen now because there's more cameras and everything. But as a little kid, my dad did take me into the clubhouse where there were champagne bottles and everything like that. Again, I was a little kid. I didn't drink anything. I didn't touch anything.
Right.
It was just a dad celebrating with his son and just seeing all the players and everyone just so happy. It kind of stinks that it happened when I was, 8 years old? I mean, I'd love for this to have happened when I was about 18 or 19 and would be able to really process things. But, I mean, it was one of the most special moments of my life and my dad's life and their whole family's life.
Yeah, I'm assuming that you're referring to the Luis Gonzalez hit.
Oh, yeah, the base hit that went over Jeter's head. And, yeah, man, what a moment.
Well, let me tell you, I was over at the Stadium Club bar out in Chandler, Arizona at the time, and I ended up doing a celebration and broke my 3 toes there. And somebody grabbed me up in the air. That was a fun time. I mean, my first World Series actually was in 1968.
Really?
When my dad took me to Game 3, Earl Wilson was on the hill. But later on, I would end up doing a broadcast with Mickey Lolich. Nice. So I had an opportunity to experience a little of that, but then Tigers was later on 184.
You taught me a little bit of Tiger history in your couple days here, so you're filling in the gaps for me, which I do appreciate.
Oh, no problem. Hey, you being a baseball guy, people need to know about the sport. If I sat there and told you how many players of today didn't know about the history of the game, that would be another topic altogether. So let's continue along those lines and talk about the famous names that have actually broadcast, like the Buck family, the Carries and the Callises. Do you feel as a Garagiola that you're trying to go ahead and carry that name tradition of these 3 names? And I'm sure there's other. Do you feel that extra pressure to do it, or you just feel like it's not that big of a deal?
I would say it's maybe somewhere in between. I think that's a narrative that's pushed out by a lot of people. It's a great media story. Bill Valona wrote a wonderful story when Josh Carey came to town, just kind of talking about the history that you're acknowledging there. But for me, I do this because I enjoy it. I have the ability at this point in my life to travel, to live off a pretty measly paycheck. And that's not me complaining. I mean, that's just the life of minor league baseball. You talk to anyone and they'll have just as many good stories as I do about what it's like. But I just believe that if I can, work on a few things and just continue to be my authentic and genuine self, and honestly just work hard and earn the respect from the scouts that I see here, from the players and the coaches and things like that, their respect means a lot more to me than what any other outside force would say. And I know that if I'm lucky enough to ever have an opportunity in the big leagues, that is an opportunity that I'll have worked hard for and will have earned. And at that point, it doesn't really matter, the name brand recognition. I'll try and do the best job that I can. And I referenced it earlier, but I think if my grandfather, were here and saw what I was doing, that, regardless of the outcome, he'd be very proud of the progress that I've made. And I'll be honest, Scott, I'm very comfortable with the idea that it might not work out for me. Doesn't matter that I'm a Garagiola. These jobs are hard to get. I think being a sports broadcaster has never been more popular at this current time. And, if in 4 or 5 years, I'm still in minor league baseball and the joy of calling games is sort of washed away, that's okay. I gave it a pretty good run, and I'll find something else in life, and I'll try and be as enthusiastic and as passionate about it as I am with broadcasting right now.
But there are a lot of other broadcasters that are fortunate enough to take advantage of what they have and the ability that they have family in the business where the name does tend to add a little bit more credibility. They're going to maybe give you a little bit longer look than most people that are trying to get in it. I mean, I think that's a given, though.
Once the door's open, it's what you do once you walk through it, right? And so I can be a Garagiola, or if I had the last name of a Buck, or a Michaels. If I hop on the air and all of a sudden it's a garbage product, then it doesn't really matter. All I've done is make some people look bad and hurt that last name legacy that so many people, they just beam when they come up to me and they learn that, oh my gosh, it's not I'm talking to Chris, I'm talking to the grandson of Joe Garagiola. And I don't take that as an insult. What it says to me is people, they loved listening so much to him and Vin, or him and Tony Kubek when we're talking about the game of the week, and their childhoods, right, were cemented by the whole family's there, and they're listening to the game, and maybe it's the Yankees and the Red Sox, or it's the Tigers and the Cardinals, or what have you. Like, that is so important to so many people. So I got to make sure that down here, while I'm still learning and trying to figure out, who I am as a broadcaster and how I prepare and how I call certain things, that I do it with the same level of respect that he did it with. Because I'll never be as good as he was. That's not what's important. It's about being the best that I can be and making sure that I still love doing this. And right now, it's an absolute blast, man.
So what are your strongest attributes, Chris? I got a taste of it, but a lot of these folks out here that are watching and listening to this for the first time don't know that you bring to a broadcast.
Yeah, I think that it's one of the best things that I do is I try and fill people in on what's happening with the now, right now with this team. I'm not afraid to try and bring other cultural aspects to the broadcast. One criticism I have of broadcasters is I think that they are so monochromatic in the way that everybody sort of looks and sounds, especially on the radio side of things, where you could hide the teams and not tell me the names, and I wouldn't be able to tell you anything that's discernible from this guy or that guy. It's the same stats and the same storylines. And I think that we need to make baseball, we need to not be afraid to deviate away from the stats and the score and talk about what's happening in the community or what's happening in the outside world. I'll try and tell some stories, Scott, about things, and they will just fall completely flat on their face. And in the middle of it, I'll go, this story is going nowhere fast. Let's try and wrap it up soon.
Right.
But again, that's the beauty of the minors, where I can really explore and try and figure out what works. And I need a few thousand more innings. I really do. But with that, I'll learn how to tell those stories and land those jokes, right? And get those guests coming in where they really feel like they're special and they're part of the broadcast, because they are when you are doing something like this. And I don't know, man, my enthusiasm and my genuine appreciation for the game and my joy for broadcasting, I just hope that translates through. Because if you ever listen to someone who's really excited about what they're talking about, and I'm sure you've seen this reaction from many people, it is infectious, and it will make people draw towards broadcasting once again. I think that's the sport. It desperately needs that.
Well, the one thing about baseball, folks, is this. We have a sport which is a little bit slower paced, so you can slide those stories in. And even in the time I've been here, it's just to find stories that are off the wall.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter, because it's an opportunity to keep people engaged, thinking, chess match. And I think that, as far as I'm concerned, that's the dynamic of this whole thing, is being able to have stories. Is anybody really worried about one ball or two strike count once in a while? Or is it that other fact that they can go ahead and learn from? And I think that as you continue to develop your own thing, you'll continue to uncover those things as well. So let's talk about the road to Pensacola, Chris. How did you get here, of all places?
Yeah, it's a pretty short story for the most part. I worked in Cincinnati as an intern in 2016. People had said that Rob Butcher, who's the PR director for the Reds, was an absolute legend and a great person to work for. So I get there. The team was not very good. And Rob, I had asked him, hey, is it all right if I just kind of peek my head sometimes in the broadcast in the radio booth? I'm interested in broadcasting. I kind of want to see how it's done. And he was so great about it. He said, when you finish your work, you can go ahead and sit in there for the whole 9 innings if you get permission from those guys. I don't care, because let's be honest, when you're not a very good baseball team, there's not a whole lot of press you have to do. So the days went by fairly quickly for us in the PR department. But Marty Brennaman, the Hall of Famer, he had reached out to me the moment I got there, because a couple months earlier, Joe had passed, my grandfather.
Right.
And he said, anytime you want to come in the radio booth, feel free to sit in. And for so many home games, I would be in there, and it was him and Jeff Brantley, goes by the Cowboy. Jim Kelch was also working there, listened to some tape for me when I was just trying to figure out what to do. And throughout the course of the year, I would write these minor league roundups, and one of the affiliates for the Cincinnati Reds at that time was the Pensacola Blue Wahoos. And a great friend of mine who now works for the Dodgers said, look, there's some things that minor league teams do where you're like an assistant PR person, but they'll let you be on the air for like 2 or 3 innings. You should reach out and see if any of these places do it.
Right.
So I just happened to be, the first place that I reached out to was Pensacola, and their PR director at the time, got back to me literally later that day. This was about August. And she said, oh yeah, we're absolutely hiring for that position next season. Can you do an interview? So next week, I get my suit on. We do a little Skype interview before Zoom was as popular as it is now.
Right.
And the interview went really well. And it was crazy because they hired me in September for a job that started in January. So I had to sit on it for about 3 months. But then I came out, moved down to Pensacola in January, just helped with some sort of before the season stuff. And yeah, 2017, April against the Tennessee Smokies. I'll never forget. That was my first series. I was working with Tommy Thrall, who has now replaced the legendary Marty Brennaman as the voice of the Cincinnati Reds. And that was the start of what has been an unbelievable journey.
Were there any particular broadcasters growing up that you idolized, excluding your grandfather? Because you know what? We know you had a great role model. He's not a Ford Frick winner by accident,
right.
And nobody's going to develop a Ford Frick award in just a matter of a few innings. It's something that you build over time following. But, outside of family, Chris, there had to be maybe a few guys that you probably would idolize, mentors, and so forth.
Yeah, when I was growing up, not a ton, because you got to understand, my dad, was the general manager there from 98 until 2000, and I think it was either 2004, 2006. Gosh, I have to go back and check. But, at that point, you're pretty much watching Diamondback games every day. So Tom Brennaman was on there for the TV play-by-play in the beginning years. And then you had Greg Schulte, who is still doing radio to this day. That guy is going to be doing D-back radio for maybe 50 years, the way things are going. And I would just listen to those guys and not really pay attention to the broadcasters for the broadcasting. It's like, are the Diamondbacks going to win? Like, we got to win. We got to make the playoffs. Like, It's really important for Dad. And it was only until I got serious again about broadcasting where I really started to pay attention to different broadcasters. So I can say today that there are people that I idolize. I still think that Joe Buck is one of the best to ever do it. I don't fully understand this hatred, this vitriol that people have towards him. I think it's misguided, and it just, again, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Brian Anderson, who has been a riser on the national scene. I wouldn't say a riser, he's a star for CBS now, but with the Milwaukee Brewers, of course, I listened to Vin in his last years with the Dodgers, and it wasn't the same Vin Scully, but it doesn't matter. You're there for the stories and the fact that it's Vin, one of the last living legends, I think, when it comes to not just baseball broadcasting, but sports broadcast. You look at that Mount Rushmore, Vin's got to be on it for sure. But, I just listen to guys now today. I love listening to Boog Shambi, John Shambi, who does ESPN radio and now stuff with the Cubs. But I can tell you as well, Scott, I've listened to everybody. Everyone in the big leagues, and there's things I like about this guy and maybe not so much about that guy, because I'm always trying to figure out what those guys do to be successful. You got to listen to the best if you want to try and be the best.
Yeah, it's amazing too. When you talk about being a broadcaster, Chris, I can tell you right now, I know if a broadcaster is prepared by his research and the amount of mistakes that he makes on the air. And again, when you've been in the business for 40 years, whether you're a writer, broadcaster, it doesn't take a rocket science, Chris, okay, to tell you who's prepared. And I'll tell you, don't kid yourself, folks. The public won't be fooled if you haven't done your homework. Baseball, to me, is a type of sport you can't fake it till you make it. The game is too long, and if you're not prepared, they will tune you out. In terms of some of the people I've enjoyed watching over the years, well, Ernie Harwell will always be number one in my book.
Legend as well, legend.
Right, and he was a mentor of sorts to me, Vin Scully, and of course I've enjoyed Joe Buck, but I also enjoyed Jack Buck as well.
Of course.
And the list can go on, and those are the four that really stand out. And I know that we have a lot of stories. So let's talk about the Blue Wahoo situation and your responsibilities with the Blue Wahoos. We know that you're the voice of them, but are there any other responsibilities in addition, Chris, to your broadcasting responsibilities?
Yeah, when I first worked here as a member of the Blue Wahoos in 18 and 19, it was a lot of behind the scenes PR work, putting together game notes, press releases, making sure the website was up to date. I mean, if you worked in minor league baseball, you know exactly some of the jobs that I'm talking about.
Right.
Quinn Studer in the ownership group, about halfway through his time with the Blue Wahoos, when Tommy Thrall was both the broadcaster and the PR director, Quinn kind of decided, you know what, I like having someone just focus on the broadcast, and I like having someone just focus on the public relations side of things. So that's basically what it had been like since 2016.
Right.
And so when Tommy left and that created an opening in 2019, I sort of obviously took that job, and they explained it to me very simply. We just want you to focus on broadcasting Blue Wahoo baseball games, doing things out in the community. If we need you to speak at banquets or galas or all-star games, we'd like you to be able to MC those. Anything on the field when we have really special events, I'd be happy to do those. But really my focus is just trying to make sure that the broadcast is where it needs to be on any given night.
Yeah, and that's a fair statement. Ironically, when you were on the air, I ran into Clint Studer and finally met him face to face.
Hey, there you go.
And you know what? And the thing that stood out about our conversation, that we're going to be talking a little bit more obviously tomorrow, is the Bay City Rollers comment that I made. He said, "You're probably the only one that actually can mention to an older audience that I know who the Bay City Rollers are, and I'm wondering on our broadcast, okay, that you were looking like, where did this guy come
pull
up
up
with
a
this?
Google search or something like that. So
you'll remember the Bay City Rollers all because of a picture that we ended up talking about. So, all right. So, by the way, folks, once again, this is Sports Exchange. My name is Scott Morganroth, Motor City Madmouth. Glad to be joined by Chris Garagiola, my broadcast partner here in Pensacola this weekend. And, Chris, no interview would be complete about what it was like for you to have to deal with me in the booth, because I know a lot of people are, and I'm not looking for anybody to pat me on the back, tell it straight, obviously, let's not kid ourselves. We had a good time this weekend.
Sure did.
Whether we had our pregame meal together, sitting in the booth, and you wondering, oh God, what's going to go? So I'm handing the floor to you. What was it like to put up with me this weekend?
Well, I tell you what, you're a character that you can't forget once you've met. That's for sure. Like we said in the first couple of days, I could tell you were excited and nervous, and a combination of the two. So, I think if you had a few games strung together, you'd be getting the names right, you'd be getting all the real basic stuff. That's a simple thing to correct. I think the hardest thing for broadcasters is the level of energy and enthusiasm you have to. It's easy to bring it for a couple days, but when you're in game number 111 in the middle of the summer, can you match that and remember that you're trying to entertain an audience? So I was really impressed with your level of enthusiasm. That it translated really nicely over the air, and that's the sort of thing. Like I said, if you can sustain that, you're always going to have a chance, because I think that so many people just lack that energy that connects with their audience. I thought you really brought it.
Thank you. Well, folks, it's been 1987 since I had the opportunity to go ahead and do play-by-play, but now I feel that after working with you, Chris, these last couple of days, if that fire isn't very high, then I don't know what the word hot really means. And yeah, of course, anybody can tell you the familiarity factor, getting to know names on the fly. And it's no excuse or anything like that, because we do know one thing about minor league baseball: the names do change frequently. But you know what, Chris? I got to tell you, it's been an absolute joy to spend time with you. You know, I feel like I was connected with your grandfather, Steve, but now I feel an even bigger bond to someone like you. You're a classy young guy, and I hope that you do make it to the major leagues. And when you do, I have no problem taking your chair in a place like this, because I know at least you ended up where you wanted to go, and I'm too old to probably get that major league job. I'm not worried about it, but the love of baseball that I have. But I'll tell you what, this has been a very unforgettable weekend. Once again, Chris Garagiola, Scott Morganroth here at Blue Wahoo Stadium in Pensacola, Florida, on the Sports Exchange. So if you're watching it on the YouTube channel, SouthFloridaTribune.com, great. If you're listening on some of our other distributors, so be it. But I couldn't be more delighted to have my broadcast partner, Chris Garagiola, with the Motor City Madmouth. So on behalf of Chris Garagiola, my name is Scott Morganroth, Motor City Madmouth. Thank you for joining us on this edition of the Sports Exchange. Goodbye, everybody. Until the next time.